Here's a quick overview of Scrum. Let's have a look at how modern software development is done using the most popular Agile framework called Scrum. It all begins by gathering input from the field. What is it that the users would want and find valuable? What is needed by different stakeholders? What is the business value of this new product being built? There is a specific role called product owner who needs to have this overall vision of the product goal. What are we going to build and how it adds value? The product owner is one person, not a committee. The product owner is accountable for maximizing the value of the product resulting from the work of the Scrum team. The work that needs to be done is often captured and defined as user stories. This is not a requirement of Scrum framework, but just a common practice that is often used. An example of a user story would be, as a user, I want to be able to reset my password so that I can regain access to my account if I forget it. All the work that needs to be done is captured into an artifact called the product backlog. It is the single source of work undertaken by the Scrum team. This is basically a big to-do list with some specific and helpful rules. The most important items are kept on top and nice-to-haves, maybes and dreams at the bottom. The top items are more clearly defined, discussed, and estimated. The product backlog is a living artifact and is often revisited and refined. Product backlog refinement is the act of breaking down and further defining product backlog items into smaller, more precise items. This is an ongoing activity to add details, such as a description, order, and size. The backlog items are often estimated using relative estimation and story points, or t-shirt sizes. We might not be able to estimate the tasks very precisely in terms of how many hours they will take to complete, but we're able to tell quite quickly if one task is much bigger or smaller than the other. So the tasks can be estimated in relation to one another. Different approaches exist how to best estimate, and one option is to use an estimation game called planning poker for that. Planning poker is a consensus-based technique used to estimate the effort or complexity of tasks. Team members assign story points to user stories by selecting cards with numbers, typically Fibonacci sequence, that represent their estimate. The cards are revealed simultaneously, and if there's a significant difference in estimates, the team discusses the reasons before re-estimating. This helps in achieving a shared understanding and more accurate estimates. Then an event or meeting called sprint planning is held. This event initiates the sprint by laying out the work to be performed for the sprint. The product owner proposes how the product could increase its value in the current sprint. The whole Scrum team then collaborates to define a sprint goal that communicates why the sprint is valuable to stakeholders. The sprint goal must be finalized prior to the end of sprint planning. The product backlog items selected for the sprint, plus the plan for delivering them, are together referred to as the sprint backlog. Work to be done is often visualized by a task board. This could be a Scrum board or a Kanban board that is physically put on wall, or more often in a tool that is used to manage the project. It doesn't matter so much which board you use, but it is important to have a solid visual overview of what is happening at all times. What are the tasks that we are working on? What have we already completed? And what will the next upcoming tasks be? A sprint typically lasts 1 to 4 weeks, more often being 1 or 2 weeks. After the sprint planning event, the team starts to actively work on the tasks chosen for this sprint. The development team is supported by a specific role called the Scrum Master. The Scrum Master is accountable for the Scrum team's effectiveness. They do this by enabling the Scrum team to improve its practices within the Scrum framework. Scrum Master is not a boss or a direct manager of the development team members. Think of this role as a coach to support the success and high performance of the team. During the work sprint, another event called the Daily Scrum is held each day. The purpose of the Daily Scrum is to inspect progress toward the sprint goal and adapt the sprint backlog as necessary, adjusting the upcoming plan work. The Daily Scrum is a 15-minute event for the developers of the Scrum team. To reduce complexity, it is usually held at the same time and place every working day of the sprint. If the product owner or Scrum Master are actively working on items in the sprint backlog, they also participate as developers. Sprints really are the heartbeat of Scrum framework, where ideas are turned into value. Each sprint may be considered a short project of its own. Different visual charts are used to track the progress of the work, such as the burn-down chart, which tracks work remaining versus time left in a sprint, or a burn-up chart, which tracks completed work over time, including scope changes, or the velocity chart, which tracks story points completed per sprint, indicating team capacity. At the end of the sprint review event is held. The purpose of the sprint review is to inspect the outcome of the sprint and determine future adaptations. The Scrum team presents the results of their work to key stakeholders, and progress toward the product goal is discussed. Work cannot be considered done unless it meets the definition of done. During the event, the Scrum team and stakeholders review what was accomplished in the sprint and what has changed in their environment. Based on this information, attendees collaborate on what to do next. The product backlog may also be adjusted to meet new opportunities. The sprint review is a working session with active discussions, and the Scrum team should avoid limiting it merely to a presentation. Another event, called the Sprint Retrospective, is also held at the end of the sprint. The purpose of the Sprint Retrospective is to plan ways to increase quality and effectiveness. The Scrum team inspects how the last sprint went and discusses what went well during the sprint, what problems it encountered, and how those problems were or were not solved. The Scrum team identifies the most helpful changes to improve its effectiveness. The most impactful improvements are addressed as soon as possible. They may even be added to the sprint backlog for the next sprint. Each sprint produces a clear output in the form of an increment, which serves as a tangible step toward achieving the product goal. Every increment builds upon the previous ones and is thoroughly verified to ensure that all increments work seamlessly together. For an increment to deliver value, it must be usable. Multiple increments can also be created within a single sprint. The collective sum of these increments is presented at the sprint review, supporting an empirical approach. However, an increment can be delivered to stakeholders before the sprint ends. The sprint review should never be seen as a barrier to releasing value. Please have a look at the official Scrum Guide to learn more about the Scrum framework. Let's now have a look at how a new app would be developed using this agile or iterative approach. In the first sprint, we developed the prototype of the app, adding just the very basic design and functionality. In the second sprint, we already add additional functionality and new features and give it out for the customers. Now we are able to monitor the customer behavior and get their feedback. In the third sprint, we improve the design based on customer feedback and add even more functionality. This way, the product gets better with each sprint while maintaining relevance to the customer base. It really is a win-win, isn't it?